Yeah, thank you so much, Jason, for the wonderful introduction. And I'll definitely talk how I managed it, but I love to travel. So yes, that said, without further ado, okay, let me just move here. This particular talk is about call for action, as well as understanding that how research can be utilized so that we can make some actionable changes in the real world, be it industry, academia, government, and so on, right? So now my talk starts, which is about the practice. So a little bit more about me. So I come from India. I have done my initial studies back in India where I was a computer engineer, right? So when I was working on these different technologies, I realized that even being a techie person, I don't have the right tools to protect myself. And how do I know that? I was myself cyberbullied. And what happened? It happened in a social media platform, and I did ask about. There is a little bit of echo. Am I audible in the last row? Okay, perfect. Okay, thanks. So when I complained about it to that particular social media platform, because that's what I could do, which is report abuse, right? And I realized they could not do anything about it because a simple thing, it was written in a language which at that time, the translation algorithm did not understand or did not understand the nuances of it. And I was actually threatened. I went to the cyber cell bureau and they could not do anything about it because it was happening outside of the country. Right? So then I realized that cybersecurity is such a big gap, and that's how I got interested in cybersecurity. So yes, the story ends up in a good note that I did my PhD in cybersecurity and so on. However, in addition to that, I have also done my MBA, as well as I'm working on the MPP, which is Master of Public Policy, where I'm trying to understand how, with the technical knowledge which I have, whatever I'm trying to build, I can apply in the real world. And I work in several technologies, including IoT, as well as AR, VR, and so on, which I will be discussing. So as I was talking about the security aspect of things, right, there's a huge gap lying here. So when we talk about security in practice versus what it happens, we just learn that in cybersecurity, apparently the ransomware companies are having HR, right, Employee of the Month. That means there's a huge area which is happening, which are trying to intrude us. However, when we are trying to talk about the user side, we are always blaming, yes, users are at fault, they don't know how to use it, we are trying to build it, they are sharing their data. But the question is, what are our options? If I want to take like a cab sharing service and that particular app shares my data, I want to know what are our options. There isn't any, right? The other options are not really that great. So that means there is a huge issue happening in the gap aspect, as well as the security design is not what we want to be. So from tech-centric, let me see if it works. So from tech-centric defenses to human-centered security design, and that's where we want to go into, right? Just a quick example. So we know about passwords, right? We all use password in some form or the other. Now, what happens when somebody who is hard of vision or they are blind users, they want to use it or they want to log in? They will use screen readers. Now imagine if in that screen readers, there are instructions, they are reading out aloud the passwords. What happens at that point? So at that point, even if a user wants to protect their data, they cannot, or they have to share that with the caregiver so as to not use the screen readers. That's why it is very important. However, when we look into some of the numbers, right? So 95% of the data breaches are tied to human error, be it the company side, be it the organization side, or the end user side, right? And these are all stats in the last couple of years. And yes, people do say that, after COVID, post-pandemic, things have gotten worse, but it was not really that good even before it. It's just that more and more people are now online. 62% of Americans don't believe it's possible to go through daily life without companies collecting data about them. And again, not collected by me, but these are actually hard facts. And several people even anecdotally mentioned that, hey, what will I do about protecting my data? It is anyways out there and so on, right? Sometimes people have mentioned, hey, my life is an open book. I don't really have to, protect that. But when I ask them, what about the identity theft, if they get to know about your SSN, then what happens, right? So that's when they think. 22.5% of people use a password manager even when trained to do so. Password managers, everybody vouches by it, right? One should use password manager. But what happens when we actually ask people, do you use that? In fact, even cybersecurity professionals in our studies have said they don't want to use it because, anybody wants to guess? Exactly, they get hacked all the time, right? So what should I do if I use password manager? And that's what experts recommend. We recommend the same thing, but they get hacked. That means we are creating a single point of failure in such situation. Older adults report losing more money. In fact, one of the other studies which we did that was on online dating of older adults. Sounds very nice and fancy, and yes, we got the publication, but 80% of the scams which happen every year towards older adults actually come from online dating. And why is that so? It's a taboo topic. People don't like to talk about dating. If a random 20-year-old whom I was talking to, again, I'm not going into the ethical areas of that, they have conned me, I'm not sharing that with my kids. Right? So there are all of these issues which are happening. In AR/VR environments, authentication flaw leads to 3 times higher risk. Now, yesterday I went to like a hackathon, and one of the award winners actually created a very cool AR/VR app where they were looking into how in kind of military services they can train them to kind of treat these people in these environments so that they can be trained, right? That is great. But imagine if I am giving my data, health information to that app, how can we protect it? Because most of these technologies do not have any authentication flow altogether. So what we find here is when it comes to the user side, there is a lot of cognitive overload. How many average apps do we have on our phones? A lot. It's actually hundreds, even if the app does not show it. Because in the back end, there are information. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I created this account in 2010. I don't even remember why I did that. There was no way I could delete it. And it's still there, right? With maybe a password of 1234. Fortunately, I have never used that, but yes, it will be there. So cognitive overload is something which is there. We ask people to do multi-factor authentication. In fact, my dissertation itself was on authentication technology, which is great. How many of us like it? Yes, isn't it? So we have to make it more seamless, else we can tell the users, hey, use multi-factor authentication, but people won't be able to use that, right? That is one of the things. Peer-based messaging backfires. How many of us likes to do, hey, you know, you are really bad at your job, and then we are like, suddenly let's do good at our jobs. Right? We don't like that. So similarly, phishing training, many companies do that. The fear-based is, hey, you were scammed. The first time I went to a company, and by the time I was working in cybersecurity, right? The first phishing email came, I don't know any employees. I opened it. I did not even do anything. I just opened it. I did not click on the link. An email came, hey, you have been phished. And in no way, if I just click on the email, it was possible unless I download something. But yes, I felt, am I really doing a PhD in cybersecurity if I don't even recognize a phishing email on my first day, right? The fear-based aspect don't work. We can probably use some more positive aspects, which I'll be discussing. Fatigues, too many prompts, notifications and all of that. Honestly, all of my notifications in the phone are off, except actually the apps which does multi-factor authentication. There are too many prompts, too many notifications, too many alerts. So nudges is something which I was really teaching this week in my class, and those don't work if we overdo it. So there needs to be a balance. Mismatch between the design and behavior. And that is something we all agree on, that we can design the best of systems, but people might be finding some new ways to exploit it, right? So that is very interesting. So real people have forgetfulness, stress, and varying tech skills as well, right? So when we even talk in this particular sector, it's a bubble, it's a tech bubble where we all care about cybersecurity and have probably worked on it, right? So that can be a concern. So we are not failing because people are careless. We are failing because systems are careless about people, because we are probably not designing for everyone. So when it is designing with not just people, what I mean by that is in academia or in several kind of research areas, people actually work with the end users. That what do you expect from the system? And of course, there are varied levels which happens, but we can come into a good balance, right? So context-aware security. So when we are talking about tailored defenses, for example, a flashlight maybe does not require my location, that to precise location, right? And there are apps which does it. But maybe a location sharing service, when I'm sharing that, that does require. So depending on the context, there needs to be the security, which is adaptable for the people, correct? Cognitive load reduction. So we have to minimize that load. So what we are doing, for example, in one of the projects, we are looking into propaganda detection, right? So we are trying to have automated ML-based tools so that we can reduce that. But giving the choice to the users what they want to see, we will just show, okay, hey, this might lead to 80% of this looks like a fake news based on these sources, and the people can take the decision. Empathy in design. As I said, say suppose cookies, right? In several, when I'm visiting, talking about the 7 countries, I actually had to go through several cookie notification to, no, I don't want to accept it, don't want to accept it, every individual one of them, right? So that's a concern. It creates a lot of overload. So we have to make sure the design has these aspects and make secure the default. So there is privacy by design, which has been done by other colleagues of mine, and also like security by design, which is happening. So by design, by default, it should be the case. Opt-in, opt-out functions, we know that, right? So depending on the context, it should be designed. So now, as I have given a little bit of kind of theory behind what should be done, let's talk about some of the case studies. The first is on the older adults and their usage of e-payment and how we developed an app. So older adults are hesitant to adopt e-payment systems due to what? Complex clustered interfaces. Now, I am basically an unofficial tech guide for my parents, okay? And they are quite tech savvy and they have now learned about all of my presentations. I actually give them the presentation as a sample before I do it. So that's very interesting. So now they have become So fun fact on that. Actually, one of my extended relatives, they got a ransomware attack through WhatsApp. Okay, so they were targeting their internal contacts and they got into the Trojans, and then they were saying that, hey, we got like 20,000 rupees, we will share this information with your kids, it will be like all these taboos. My parents got the same message. Unfortunately, all of my talks did pay, and they were like, no, don't click on this because yes, your daughter said this, right? And they were scared that I'll scold them. That's a different thing. Anyways, so yeah, fear of fraud or financial loss. One of the things is like they know if I have the cash, the physical money, then I can pay them and there is no aspect of financial loss here. Rather, they don't want to do the e-payment. When did this model fail? Pandemic, COVID, right? So at that point, they were unable to travel, and older adults were the people who were targeted even in this situation, so they could not work through it. So they had to adopt, but they really did not know about it. And familiarity with the digital transactions too. So they are not really familiar with these kind of aspects. They are not using it. And this is a new technology to them. We have not just given them any time to adapt through it, right? So that's a problem. And low trust. They do not trust the mobile technology, right? They are like, oh, this is like a garbage box. I don't want to use it, okay? So that's another concern. Another thing what we found is that there are usability barriers. Now, what is usability barriers? It is like, I cannot use the technology. So there are several instances when these apps are not even able to function properly. The service is not happening, it is delayed, or it is deducting the amount multiple times, right? So there is these kind of issues happening. So what we did, we developed, this is called something like a high fidelity prototype. It works, but we also checked it with the users, right? So there was multi-factor authentication, there was social login aspects, so we made them more easier. We looked into the font size. Now it looks a little tiny given that's a screenshot, but we looked into the font size, color, and so on. So what we did a simplified UI. It's a larger font, you have to just trust, make sure that the buttons are clear. You don't have to go behind 10, 20 different walls to go through actually securing their account or creating their account or even, updating the password. Sometimes I want to update passwords and I myself cannot find how to do that. I have to look into like Google that, hey, you know how to update the password of this particular social media, and I cannot. Try deleting any of your accounts. They intentionally sometimes make it more difficult, right? So those are the things. Secondly, targeted education. We actually gave them the option where they can do targeted education. Why are we asking them to do multi-factor if they want to learn more about it, right? And what do they mean by multi-factor authentication? Because for older adults, there is this caregiver aspect, right? So the multi-factor authentication might be their kid's account, right? So then connecting with that, getting the OTP, that can be a problem as well. So we made it easier, and we gave them trust cues, reassuring languages, right? We made them multiple prompts when they are sending money, where are you sure you want to send this money to this person for this purpose, right? So we gave them proper reassuring languages, and it actually worked. That said, we actually worked with other older adults to rebuild this aspect. So what we did here, we hired, when we say hired, we requested people, 400 participants to participate in our survey. All of them were 60 and above, and they tried to evaluate our prototype, whether it works, what are the changes they will require, and so on. Very tech experience level. Some of them actually worked in AI ML in the 1970s even, when actually the Internet Act was in process. Then recruited from both urban and semi-urban regions, and we participants interacted with this high fidelity prototype and looked into authentication modes. It was not a surprise that they preferred knowledge-based authentication. Why was that so? Why would we prefer an authentication which is supposed to be less secure? What about the fingerprints? They have wrinkles. Sometimes the fingerprint does not work in many of the apps, right? There are other issues. The face changes, then the app is actually not recognizing them and they cannot work through it, right? It's not working. They are not putting into the front. Sometimes if I remove the makeup, the face recognition does not even recognize me. So yeah, I get that, right? So we use like Likert scale surveys, behavioral observation, and also open-ended feedback, how we can improve that. All I'm trying to say is it's not perfect, right? We gave them the options and we found that, hey, knowledge-based authentication actually works. So how we can actually secure it? Make it multi-factor authentication enabled as well. Not let them, like maybe have your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 password, but also have another added layer. So we could see that when we are adding the users, it can be actually helpful. So what we found, right? Let's talk about the numbers. 91% preferred knowledge-based authentication. As I mentioned, 60% rejected biometric because for a change it was not really working. If you think it might be a problem of our own application or device or how it is interrupting, we also asked what you use for your other kind of technologies, right? So they don't even use the face recognition in their device, like their mobile device. They actually use the password, right? Even though there is a memory aspect added to it. Then 84% felt more secure when they understood how the authentication works. They are actually reading through it. They are clicking on this I button and they are looking into it. Why is authentication needed? So even if they feel that, hey, you know, like we need 300 hours to actually go through the privacy policies, and that's true, maybe some people want to read more about it. So we can give both the option where there is a shorter version and there is a longer version too. And in fact, we have worked on modular privacy policies where it works. So they actually appreciated that. People were 3 times more likely to complete these transactions when they were getting these reassuring. And some people mentioned that, hey, you know, like sometimes because of like for the dexterity aspect, I have mistakenly clicked and sent money to someone else I did not want to. And it has actually happened. Now, given that we had another layer added to it, hey, are you sure to want to send this money to someone? They were like, hey, that was really helpful, right? So depending on the people, we might want to change it. But for somebody who is like really busy, they want to send it and they don't care if they want to send thousands of dollars to this random person, they might not want that option. So we can add these things. 72% indicated they would adopt the system if it retained their preferred authentication method and design. Not just say that, hey, go with the biometric because this is more secure or something. Actually give them the option, right? What they want to do. So that's what we want. By default, we all want that autonomy. So designing security around user comfort and comprehension can dramatically improve adoption, especially among older demographics. Now we looked into that how PIN-based and everything was actually preferred when it came to e-payment. Because even if we say, hey, we don't really want the numbers, how are we exchanging or transferring the money? These are numbers, so they are clicking on it. They are already used to it. So depending on the technology, it might change. Now let's talk about a different case study. As I was mentioning about the AR/VR, augmented virtual, and the mixed reality environment, let's talk more on that. So the challenge, AR/VR headsets often lack basic security features. In fact, that is true. There is no login screen to make it easier, so they can get access. Now the thing is, AR/VR came into existence when we were thinking about entertainment, gaming, and people often think that that does not need security. Nowadays, gaming is avatars or avatars, right? And they are actually giving their credit card information. They are giving several important details. For example, how do I look? What is my sexual orientation? And in some countries, if you reveal your sexual orientation, it can be actually be very catastrophic, right? So they are giving a lot of personally identifiable information, which we also call PII. So yes, these applications, even if it is not used in, say, suppose healthcare or military, then we need to protect it. Secondly, nowadays we are using AR/VR for healthcare and military, right? So it's not just for gaming, and we are using it for even classrooms and so on. So we need to secure it. Shared use, right? People cannot afford thousands of dollars of devices just by themselves. They are using it for shared purposes. That means the accounts need to be there, as simple as that. But if everybody is logging in and everybody uses the same data, that's not really true. Third, sensitive apps, as I mentioned, are already there. So there are lack of secure design. So what we did, we used something called the Zeta protocol, which is the zero trust authentication. So here what happened is, it is again a knowledge-based authentication, but what it is a cognitive dissociance, right? So what it does is, suppose you consider apple and red together. So your password can be red apple. I'm giving a random example here, right? So you are associating some of the objects with itself. Using the Zeta protocol, we developed something called the Think scheme. This was done through our collaboration in Germany. And there, what we did was, we gave them about 32 grids. So based on the grids, they were selecting 5 different objects which are related, right? So if I say the car and the wiper, right? So I will select car, wiper in 2 of the grids. So there is kind of an association going on. Of course, why is it needed? Because when you are selecting it in the grid with your headset, then you are remembering those things and you can associate it, right? And what it is protecting from? It is protecting from shoulder surfing attack. Right? So not what is shoulder surfing. Basically, I always say that computer security people, they are not very creative. Basically, people who are surfing over your shoulder and seeing that, right? So if there is a number pad and my PIN code is actually 1234, people can see my hand movement and can guess what it can be. One of the other aspects to it is just randomize it, and that can help, right? But we wanted to take a little bit of notch for the memorability aspect as well and look into the graphical authentication scheme, right? So in there, these images were randomly assigned, correct? So there is some form of authentication. Of course, as I said, no security is perfect, but we are getting somewhere. So in there, we use multimodal aspects. So where are they actually gazing? So we actually change the location as well, where the objects are appearing, right? Not just a grid. So people are not just looking into the grid. That was one. Secondly, head movement. Where are they moving their heads? When it is suppose their password is an apple, they are looking into the kitchen, right? So where is their head movement and so on. So they are associating like that too. Third, the body orientation, what they are looking into. There have been several incidents where because of AR/VR, there have been fatal incidents too, because they have literally walked outside of the boundary region and there have been accidents, right? Third, spatial behavior. How are they interacting? What if like I am wearing a headset and I'm completely just bunging myself here, right? So that can be a concern. Authentication identity in real time without interrupting the AR/VR. So they feel it's kind of a game as well, right? They are selecting the objects. So it does not feel like an added overload. Remember, we talked about the cognitive overload. So 3 times higher accuracy in verifying authorized user compared to PIN or gesture-based methods. Because again, we have used gesture-based passwords in our phone as well, and that does not really work, right? All the time, because people can guess it. So in this way, we can see even while changing the technological side of things, what kind of protocol we are using, we can actually help people. So in immersive spaces, security should feel invisible. So because in that case, if we are taking the experience away, we are taking that entire functionality out of it, right? Why is AR/VR needed for the immersive aspect? In that, if I ask them, okay, check your 11-digit password, because that's what security people say is secure. That won't work, okay? So we have to be innovative. So privacy by design, as I mentioned, is a key principle which we have been using for a long time. So what it says, default to privacy preserving seconds, right? By default, make sure that it is maybe an opt-in when you are trying to give access to some of the permission settings, right? And some of them can be opt-out depending on the requirements of it. Collect only the data you truly need. Does the flashlight app, which said that, hey, you know, it was created for emergency purposes, really require my precise location and my home address? No, right? So only let's be ethical about it, even as people who are creating these apps and technologies, and make sure it gets done, right? There are, again, 11 principles of that, of real control, not just opt-outs or buried in menus, right? So give them the real control and not just, okay, you know, you have an illusion that you can delete your app, but once you delete your app, your data is still there. Let's not do that. So overcomplicating login flows do not work, right? Many a times, even when I'm creating the login and everything, it does not work. There is a QR code, you have to scan in the phone, then you have to connect the phone and so on. What if my QR code scanner is not working, right? So we have to not overcomplicate it. Hiding privacy options is not really a good thing, right? So what are the real world consequences? We actually get increased death tickets. I worked in companies where every day when we were trying to apply the multi-factor authentication, we used to get hundreds of tickets. This is not working. What about like they had the customer facing service where they cannot take their personal phone? right? It's a basic thing. They cannot authenticate. So then we gave them what? The security keys. They lost the security keys. Then what happens? So these are all the concerns. Users abandon security tools entirely. Because what I say is security is something, if it is very invisible, right? Till it is working, we don't see it. So that's why people don't care unless and until you make them believe, okay, what can happen? Workarounds and shadow IT becomes normalized. Hey, you know what? I cannot send this data to my boss. Can you please help? Maybe I'm telling it to my partner, my friend, my parents. What am I doing here? I'm actually sharing that information with a third party, be it somebody I trust, but still, right? So these are something which happens all the time. So early user testing. So we have to make sure there is early user testing, interaction with diverse groups. As I mentioned about, we are working with authentication for the blind people. If we are not interacting with the blind people and just assume this is what they want, what will happen? We will create something which fails, right? Then simplifying language and flow, designed for edge cases, not just power users. By power users, I mean the convenience sample. Don't just ask your colleague to test your app, actually do the proper user testing, right? If users are failing, it's not their fault, it's probably the design. So cross-sector applications are important. So healthcare, simplify patient portals and constant flows, right? We sometimes say, okay, the health apps need to be protected and the medical professionals need to know. But why? Do I need to know all of the medical details which my doctor is saying? No, we can provide them easier tools. The insurance companies, they have access to the health. When we are trying to do the HIPAA violation, are we looking into the insurance companies which are the third parties? Many a times, no, right? So that can be a concern. Again, user-friendly language for the alerts. Don't use, hey, your identity theft has happened in your account or something like that. Actually say somebody is trying to access your account, which has been happening nowadays. Seamless and immersive security should be there, right? So what you can do right now, conduct usability testing. And when people say usability testing, it's not just you testing it, which is great for a pilot, but also we need to hire real users and adopt them. Prioritize accessibility in all design tools. It is very important, right? If I'm designing something, say suppose people who are deaf and I'm not even considering them or did not even recruit them, that can be a concern. Offer role-specific, context-aware training, right? So co-create. As we were discussing, if the ransomware companies can actually, co-create something, they are collaborating, why don't we actually talk to somebody who is in the design team or the privacy team who is in the next desk of mine, right? So that is important and we have to make sure that we work together. So what we can do, behavioral scientists are there, talk to the academics. We always want to collaborate, right? UX designers, developers, engineers, policy makers. In fact, yesterday I was actually talking with one of the policy makers to understand, okay, what are the hindrances when we talk about, say, suppose ethical AI or privacy preserving AI and so on. And for example, situations like this where we can collaborate and talk more, right? So that is very important. I'm running a little bit out of time, but that said, meaningful matrices, one thing which I definitely want to say, and talking about picture slides, this can be one of them, right? Not just saying how many people did adopt multi-factor authentication. Everybody is bound to adopt it because we have made it mandatory. So the success rate would be 100%, and yes, let's have multi-factor. How much time are they taking? Right? One of the earliest studies I did, it took 1 hour for an older adult to authenticate with the security tokens. 1 hour. Can we imagine that just to authenticate? Right? So how much time are they taking? What are the error rates? Are they requiring any help? What is the user feedback, trust scores, and everything, right? So that is extremely important. So yes, zero trust by design, that is important. AI-driven adaptive security. Now everything is AI. We cannot just ignore it. What I say, very controversial, but AI is nothing but data science. Data science is nothing but maths. So we have always relied on maths, no matter what. So now we have to adapt through it. Personalized nudges are very important. In fact, companies do that. Right? So they actually say, hey, this particular house is the right fit for you, and suddenly you are looking into that, right? So we do the personalized search. Why don't we do it for security too? Okay, big ideas to remember. Most security failures are human, non-technical. One size fits all does not work. So we have to make sure there is the good profiling done in that case, and they create it. Good design can prevent bad behavior, and users don't fail security. System fails user, right? So let's stop blaming them. So yes, thank you so much. I'm open to questions.
Amazing. Do we have any questions?
I often tell if there are no questions, that means I did a fantastic job. Everybody understood everything.
Any questions? Oh, this is weird.
Or everyone is ready for lunch. Okay,
I was gonna go, but you're all right.
So, are you seeing any movement towards active biometrics? Like, I'm talking to some organizations right now that are actually considering using the Apple Watch and bringing things out, some of the data elements out of that individual personal health. I mean, it's all in full disclosure. There's all kinds of privacy and security, but they have high risk employees where they want to know that this person is there and is active. Are you seeing that type of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, a few years back, there was a paper which talked about brain scanning as one of the authentication means. And for obvious reasons, there are concerns about the privacy aspect because we cannot really change it. So yes, there are absolutely action items there, but there are several privacy concerns. People are not even comfortable giving their fingerprint. Now we do it because that's easier, right? So for them, giving away the heartbeat is one thing, but talking about brain scans, they are definitely not. But there are, I think we can do more privacy preserving aspect to it so that it is not really shared. But yes, people are talking about it, and there are a lot of actions going into there because it's seamless.
Because it's seamless.
Yes.
And it's unique.
It is unique. One thing which has happened in one of my discussions is like they were talking about this can be an encouragement factor where, you know, they talking about health, right? They are talking about good health in the companies. So they were not doing authentication, but they were doing some incentives based on the number of steps or something like that. Right. And that is helpful to them, except the fact that if we get competitive and then people are, oh, I can get this bonus if I actually meet 10,000 steps every day, which is great for some people. But if people have some conditions, it's probably not the great. Of course, then we rely on the person to take that decision, but it can have its own repercussions. But it is unique, and we should talk more about that for sure.
Thank you.
Of course. Thank you for the question.
Great presentation. You covered a lot. I feel like that's great. I loved the study with the 400. I just had two questions, which I'm sure you just didn't have time to show, which was, were there gender differences in any of their opinions about MFA versus passwords and stuff? And when you say older adults,
yeah.
What does that encompass? And were there any differences in age ranges, right? Is older 65 and up, and is there differences in the 65 to 75 and those that are older, or what was the range for that, and were there any differences in the findings about what they would tolerate?
Yeah, no, absolutely, and thank you so much for the question. And given the time, I could not. I should have added the links to my papers, but it's there in my scholar profile and everything. That said, yes, there were differences, and I did not want to mention that, but even the older adults said, like my grandma and all of that. Actually, women scored much better in terms of authentication than men, just say, right? So yes, that's what happened. But that said, we did not want to, based on our data set, yes, that happened. We did not want to make like a generalized statement, but because that will also be wrong. In terms of the usages of the age, yes, we did not have anybody beyond I think the person who had, it was like 89 was the highest, which we had for obviously after that, it was mostly on the caregiver side, and we did not get it, unfortunately. But yeah, 65 to 75 scored much higher in terms of the adoption, in terms of the usage and so on, because they were using it more often than the 75 to 85 range, but it was not a stark difference or statistically significant difference in that level. So yeah, there are more data about it. I'll definitely share the paper with you.
Great paper, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Divine from Bay Atlantic University. Yeah, regarding simplifying the interface for the older folks, I think work with them a lot, but the more you simplify it for them, the more, the bad guys can easily, trying to reconcile the differences. But I realize that this, like the baby boomer, they really they don't like technology because in this problem, they rush to us, and at times when they come to us, they expose their sensitive information for us to go around, just to help them with simple support services on that. So how do you reconcile this fact that they are trying to go around it, they just hate it?
Yeah.
Some of them are really reluctant to learn, but at the same time, they need help because whatever help they need, either they call the help desk, the phone, they don't like that. So how do you go about reconciling this, simplifying it, at the same time making it more accessible or for the hackers.
Yeah.
But they go around trying to figure out people to help and they expose their sensitive information. So this is really a dilemma.
Yeah. No, excellent question in terms of like how do we balance in a way usability and security, right? So what we mean to say, make it more accessible in terms of the design, not like, okay, just remove all kinds of security possible, right? So we have to make sure when we come to older adults, there is, if we do a multi-factor authentication, there is a way they could actually add a trusted caregiver in there too, so that they can also authenticate and what is happening. So if in case of this has happened, like these are called the dating scams or romance scams, right? So in there, people have actually caught because they have seen, hey, Dad, there is a lot of money going out of this account. Could you please explain, is there everything going on? And they were able to stop that. That said, there have been concerns where these partners who are not malicious partners in a way, they have gotten access, which is called kind of intimate partner violence in these kind of situation, and they have gotten access to it. So yes, again, the solution is not really perfect. That said, like simplified language makes them feel more secure and more trusting the app that, hey, oh, you want to like send the money and it is making it easier for you to send the money rather than, oh, go through like 10 hoops and I don't really understand. Can you please help? Right? So making the design easier, but making sure the security is still there. Multi-factor authentication is still there. There are aspects you can still add password managers and so on for them to help and remember. Of course.
Hi, I'm wondering if you've already thought about this, but as I watched what you talked about, I've collaborated with a researcher who's been working on simulation and predictive models for cybersecurity maturity.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if this kind of thing could be extended where you could almost begin to build a model that says if you do certain things, you get into a certain probability band of outcomes. And if you don't do certain things, you're going to be band limited, where it can be predictive, where people can actually start to make business decisions based and return on investment and impacts based on outcomes. Is that something that's possible with this research?
Absolutely. And thank you so much for asking this question. And in fact, as I was mentioning, my dissertation itself was on multi-factor authentication. And so what I did was I built a risk-based authentication model, and we deployed it in a company with more than 90,000 employees in there. So what we were doing kind of a risk profile based on people's usages, and not just by answering, okay, answer these questions and let's develop your risk profile, right? Through like behavioral modeling as well as predictive modeling, as you said. And based on that, we gave them challenges in terms of authentication rather than doing it. So for example, if somebody opens all the emails, links and everything, for example, right, and answers back to everything, forwarded to their personal email and so on, which is not ideally the good behavior of in an organization. For them, we made sure that there was harder level of challenges in the authentication. So absolutely, to answer that, there can be done based on their behavioral aspect. Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Over to Jason.